Welcome to the Global Affair podcast, brought to you by Love Out Loud, the world's largest love-based movement, actualizing a civilization of love by 2030. My name's Nicole Gibson, and join me and some of the world's brightest minds as we bring some of the most important and controversial conversations of our time into a space of unity. It's important to know that as your host, this isn't about my personal opinion or bias, but rather an opportunity to listen with love, honesty, curiosity, and reveal the true universal experience us humans have amongst the differences. So if you love the show, please let us know by giving us a rating and tell us how to make this conversation easier for other people to jump into as well. And with that, let's get it.
Curiosity when we go on a literal trip, right? A vacation, we travel, we get excited. What's going to happen?
That kind of trip, okay.
Yeah. Or the other kind sometimes too. And then when we want to go on that inward journey, there's this like retraction, right? We get very fearful. So I very much wanted a name that would evoke that sense of curiosity and adventure for that inward journey as well, and have it be applicable, in the outer world as well. So that's the passport to pleasure side of it, but also the passport quite literally. It's not one destination. One experience, hopefully, doesn't set up your whole life and your sense of self and all those things.
Right.
It's a bunch of different stamps. You're going to a bunch of different Exactly. So all of our relationships, of any kind, we're in relationship, right?
Sure.
Together here, we're in relationship with your audience. Those are agreements together, and they're all enriching our life. So the more stamps, ideally, the more experiences, the more enrichment of your life with that sense of adventure, to me, that gives you that passport to pleasure.
All right, so it's a much more diplomatic way of saying like notches on your belt.
Okay, and don't hear me wrong with like more equals better, period. Like That's a much more...
I want to get into that.
Multi-layered.
Nuance.
Yes, definitely.
Right. And so, okay, so if you were to sort of summarize your mission, we were chatting briefly before we started rolling that, this to you is really about how we relate broadly and not necessarily just sexually or even intimately. What is your why behind this mission?
Well, there's two ways to say it, depending on how censored we are.
Uncensored.
Uncensored, fantastic.
Yeah.
If our world leaders were better fucked, we'd be less fucked.
You reckon?
Yeah, a little bit. And I genuinely, I mean that also in where it comes to relationships and intimacy in all its forms, right? So if we have better relationships that last longer, we'll have a better world that lasts longer.
Right.
How we relate is how we relate. And if we're trying to fill a wound inside of ourselves with a salve that has nothing to do with it, then we're going to be seeking that for all time. Nothing, no amount of power, no amount of access, none of that. If it's not here and we haven't, sorted that connective tissue, nothing else is going to do that.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like I often contemplate, and I wrote about this in my most recent book, as we rise to success, just the challenges that come with intimacy and trust.
Very much.
And I think that that's definitely a globally relevant kind of topic, especially right now as we're dealing with some pretty existential challenges, conversations, in America, let alone the rest of the world.
Yeah.
And so what was it that drove you to want to pursue this as a mission, as a conversation? Who broke your heart?
The world. No,
right. I get that.
No, this isn't this as far as the conversation around, relationship dynamics is not a seeking of filling anything. There is no lack that this is trying to remedy. There is no broken heart that this is a fix for. This is an expansion of myself. So for me, it began very much as a personal journey where I was very much a serial monogamist. So what that means is I would have, one partner about the same amount of time, then break up, single for about the same amount of time, into the next relationship, same amount of time, over and over. A more accurate term for that is actually serial non-monogamy. We talk about non-monogamy now as, concentric relationships that are occurring simultaneously, right? Most people actually experience serial non-monogamy in their life.
Yeah, they have more than one partner.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, most of us have more than one partner throughout our lives. So when I realized that was a pattern for myself, I'm a nerd. I'm like, let me adjust a variable and see what happens, right? So I was like,
and how many relationships kind of into your journey, and was it kind of dissatisfaction with that whole model that drove you to question it?
It was frustration. It was, it's something was never quite right. Like I was always curious. I had never actually experienced what people talk about as far as jealousy. For me, I was always very interested and turned on and excited by the idea of my partners with other people. I wanted to hear about their other stories, their fantasies. I loved pretending. inverse, I had to be, you know, like a virgin who couldn't even spell penis or like whatever. But
in their minds or
in their minds,
by
yeah.
okay.
And at that time, I was closeted in every way. I was only dating men. It was, you know, monogamy, and that was all I thought that was possible. You know, that's what we're prescribed. This is relationship. This is the one way, and if it's not working, you're the problem.
Yeah.
So I went through all of that, right? And what I learned from adjusting, I was like, okay, let me be single for at least longer than I normally am to see what's on the other side of that. And the answer is all of the shit. Like, I really got to start going
like facing
through
your own
my
shit.
stuff. Yeah, I was like, oh,
Staying
I'm
with
with
yourself.
me now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And realizing like, oh, I was seeking relationship to avoid this relationship. So what's there for me? So that really began what was ultimately like my personal development journey, which will be, of course, ongoing. And then I still, you know, I did get into a few more monogamous relationships, but at that point was able to really voice like, hey, I'm interested in opening this up. Can we invite, you know, someone else? Yeah, I didn't even know what I was asking. There was no language for me. I didn't, there were no resources. So it landed on,
No
you know,
guidebook?
no, there was no
Opening
map.
up your
Surprisingly,
monogamous relationship.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you. And that's not to discredit. There were books at this time. I didn't know what I didn't know, right? There's even less awareness then than there is now. And this is, you know, almost a decade ago. So, you know, we settled on we can have a threesome with another woman. Great. I'm here for that. I wanted to explore that side of myself. Wonderful. Never happened. And then I got into what ultimately became my last monogamous relationship. And we tried to actually open it up, which he was on the road very frequently for work. And I could join when I could, but wasn't always able to. So, you know, we talked about, hey, maybe I actually started, for me, I was like, I would really love for you to connect with somebody when you're out and about. And I want to, you know, if you send me a consensual picture, just like you two of you smiling, whatever, and then tell me about it afterwards, I would love that. That feels really good.
And what was that? Just curiously, what was that in you? Was it like feeling like it was attractive to know that your partner was getting his needs met?
So there's a word called compersion, and it's commonly referred to as the opposite of jealousy. And really, it's the sensation that you get. It's experiencing pleasure from hearing or seeing your partner experience pleasure with someone else. And we have that for our friends, right? Think about when your best friend, you know, gets that promotion or whatever it is, you get excited for them, right? That's a pleasurable experience when people you care about are experiencing good things. We've sort of separated certain types of relationship in our society as, you know, romantic relationships or sexual relationships are on this sort of higher playing field. And then we've made that also very exclusive. And that somehow exclusive has become commitment or has become meaningful or has become, you know, honor. And we have what are called compound meaning, what I refer to as compound meanings.
Totally.
Where these are all just these are
it says more about who we are.
Yeah, and it's a very interesting thing to look at. Why is this one type of relationship so much more important? And why, if it's so important, are we only supposed to have one? If relationships enrich us, if I love you, like we don't, this is a whole other conversation. We don't own people. Yeah. My man, my woman. I don't like to share. That's something that, you know, can come up for a lot of people. Well, you don't own another person. That's a very problematic perspective, but it's something we sort of talk about in other ways in our society and how we see loving relationships now. There's this possessiveness element, and that's not how you build trust. That's not commitment. You know, I like to say relationship without freedom isn't partnership, it's ownership. So for me, compersion was what I thought, you know, I didn't have the word then. I thought that was jealousy. So I'm like, this is fun. I don't know why people have such a, you know, bad time with it. But, you know, back to that story really briefly, I did meet someone. They sent me a picture, super cute. I was very excited. They ended up just staying up all night talking. Fantastic, great start. And then another time, I loved it. I was like, here we go, we're off. And then another time he was out of town, and I had a friend of mine who was coming back into town. We, years ago, had, you know, a sexual history, and it was very, very much, you know, we had talked about it, no romantic interest, very much just friends, but someone I trust and adore dearly, and vice versa. So I was like, this is perfect. We already have a history, safe person. We already know that's all this is. This will be a great entry point. My partner gave me what he called his green light. I had an incredible night with my friend. It validated so much for me because I felt an opening that even now it's still hard to explain, that I felt so much more connected and held and trusted and loved by my partner. He was very much a part of that experience for me. Just because he wasn't physically there doesn't mean he wasn't a part of it. And so we had agreed that I would call him afterwards and, you know, we'd talk about it. So I called him immediately and was just so appreciative. And, you know, what do you want to hear? I'm happy to share anything. I love you so much. Thank you. And it was just dead silence on the phone. And then all he said was, I can't believe you did it. And it just imploded from there pretty much.
So he struggled with that whole experience?
I don't know, honestly, to this day, if it was a matter of he thought he would be okay with it and then very quickly realized he wasn't, or if he had been, some version of testing me. Either way, I wish so deeply that we could have leaned into that discomfort together. Like, we didn't know what we were doing. I didn't want to hurt him. That was not my goal. I thought we were stepping into this, unknown together.
And this kind of situation where, a past lover who is now a friend, and that line was clear in, I guess, your previous relationships that you would have classified as serial monogamy, would that have been a difficult conversation for you to have to your partner at the time, to say, hey, I have a friend, we have a history, but that's in the past, I want to spend some time with them? Based on your previous frame, was that challenging for you to discuss? In
regards to like just socializing with them, or you mean opening up to potentially, explore sexual connection again?
Socialize. I mean, from my understanding, that night, was there an intimacy with this person? Okay, right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so no, it certainly wasn't an easy conversation. Again, we didn't have tools, a guidebook, language. It was sort of like, I'm curious about this. I want to do this with you. What does that look like? And, if I knew then what I know now, I would have done so many things differently.
Yeah, sure.
I made all the mistakes. That's why I do what I do now, is because I've spent the last almost 10 years learning everything the hard way. So ideally, my clients don't have to.
Okay. Yeah.
There are better ways to do this. And you absolutely can, figure it out on your own. But you're going to waste a lot of time. You're going to hurt yourself and other people, most likely. You're going to make a lot of potentially expensive mistakes. And it doesn't have to be like that.
And what are the struggles that your clients are coming to you with? I want to experience more intimacy, or I'm not satisfied, in my monogamous relationship. What are generally their challenges?
Well, it can be a variety of things. So another, compound meaning is that our, emotional intimacy and physical intimacy are the same drive, and they're not, right? We have a romantic, intimate, emotional connection, and we can have a sexual connection. That you can have both, but they're not intrinsically connected. Those are just choices we get to make on the ingredients of what we want to have in various relationships. So I'll get couples that have what I call mismatched libidos. So we have someone who has a lower sex drive and someone who has a higher, and that's fine. And the idea that we are, what's the word I'm looking for? Like obligated. Why does one partner have to
adapt?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
They're not saying, I want to leave you, I'm not attracted to you anymore.
Yeah,
none of that is happening.
Wrong with the relationship.
Yeah, and think of it in any other context. If a partner loves, I don't know, Marvel movies, and the other one's just not into that stuff, why do you have to go to all the Marvel? No, you go with friends that enjoy that thing. Like, it's okay to have other partners that enrich your life. There's, again, that compound meaning of what these things mean, and that assumption around them that is terrifying to us, because we're not actually taught any skills on how to deal with any of those uncomfortable emotions, right? Like, jealousy is not something to avoid. It's telling you something. It's giving you information on your journey of personal discovery and development.
What about, say, the argument that having a single sexual partner that you're sharing that level of intimacy with, there's a sacredness energetically to ensuring that that's not, shared with other people?
That's a choice that you make, right? So sacred ritual is what we create.
Yeah.
So we decide what is sacred to us. We decide the container that takes. If sacred means one to you, then you need to communicate that to other partners so that you can find people that are going to be a partner with you in that. That is not definitive, that's your choice.
Yeah.
And that comes with determining your ideal relationship structure. So if for you that, based on what your hierarchy of needs are when it comes to emotional or sexual needs, if that is in alignment, if monogamy is the best suited relationship dynamic for you, fantastic. Then communicate that. Because I also want to say, I am not going to sit here and say monogamy versus non-monogamy, or one is better than the other.
Right.
It's not even one, right?
Yeah.
My conversation that I'm interested in, that I would love more of us to get involved in, is relationship dynamics as a whole.
So it's like, how do we dismantle kind of the rules that we've been taught and actually just start to recognize, okay, there's something that's authentic for me that might actually sit outside of those rules, and that's okay.
Yeah, and understanding that, like, if it's monogamy, great, choose it.
Yeah.
Don't get prescribed it.
Yeah, don't be obligated to be in it.
That choice is powerful. Like with anything in life, I just want people to choose. And in order to make an actual choice, you have to be informed of all the options that are available.
Totally. I mean, I think that there's that really, when you're set free, your authentic self, prevails in that space. I know for me, if I'm in a relationship, for example, where my partner's really controlling, I feel far more inclined to want to, share my energy with other people because I feel constrained. But if I have a partner that is really able to set me free, I actually don't want to share my energy with other people. So it's an interesting kind of paradoxical. Yeah. But I think a lot of people have that experience. It's actually when they're not able to feel free within the confines of a connection that they then start to seek, other ways of getting their needs met, because that's only human.
Well, and it's the other partner too who feels that need to control or to hold, right? What's the authenticity behind that? I'm terrified of losing vulnerability. Yeah. Exactly. And the power of actually owning that vulnerability is just it's unparalleled. Once you are
it's a really powerful point. Yeah, I think very transformative to understand in relationship. Maybe I'd love you to just sort of speak to that, how to even, because I know in periods of my own journey, and vulnerability is something I've worked considerably on in my intimate relationships, being able to peel back the layers and really communicate what's there, and not communicate the defense mechanisms and the the things that you don't really mean, but actually get to the core, the softness. How would you encourage someone to maybe start to look at areas of their communication where there is defense, and start to help them dismantle some of those layers?
I think that's a multifaceted topic, and we can go micro and macro on that for sure. They're, of course, always related. Looking at where the communication is coming from. Am I trying to make myself comfortable right now, or am I trying to understand my partner? Because when your focus is on the other person, you have to be responsible for the discomfort of what might come to you.
Sure.
If what you're communicating is solely to make yourself comfortable, then you're not in partnership.
And
that makes sense?
That would be, to basically remain concealed and to not reveal those deeper vulnerabilities would be acting in self-interest and not really acting in partnership.
You're not trusting your partner to be a safe space.
Or yourself.
Yeah. Because so your relationship is an agreement, right? Yeah. That's all it is. An agreement between two people that have their own boundaries. And then you've agreed upon a set of boundaries for that relationship. So if you are building this thing with this person, you've decided that they're the person that you want to build this with. This is ideally. And that thing that you're building is a safe container in which you can be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
If it's not, you're not going to grow.
Right.
Discomfort is growth. There's no way around that.
For sure. I'm so aligned with this approach to thinking about relationships and building security. And I look at kind of, the dating scene, not just here in LA, but I think broadly amongst millennials and Gen Z. And I do not see many relationships that are prioritizing the true development of trust, security, even kindness, loyalty, these kind of values. I think just the way that we've been initiated into dating hasn't lent itself to really looking at the reward of committing, to that process.
And that's that key. It is actually a reward, but not the way that you're meaning it. It's that reward cycle that we get chemically from the hits, the the swipe. Exactly.
Yeah.
So we're in this literal addiction loop of getting that thing rather than the benefit, maybe is a better word, of immersing in something.
Yeah.
And what's the way to say this? That you can have an availability or an unavailability of self in any relationship dynamic. It doesn't matter how many or how few partners you have.
Right.
That's a you conversation.
Yeah.
So whether I have one or three, my commitment to self, the kind of relationship I'm interested in with whoever I'm in relationship with is an available one.
Yeah.
Whether I have one partner or multiple.
Yeah, open or closed. I interviewed Katie Hendricks a couple of years ago, and that was a great interview. And she actually said something that was really transformative for me at the time, which is in relationship, you're only making one of two decisions. You're either choosing to move closer to that person or you're moving further away.
Exactly.
And that awareness was very transformative to think about in the context of how I was relating to people. Am I sort of taking a breath and consciously choosing to stay in connection, or am I running away from connection, at any given opportunity because it's uncomfortable? And that's really hard work.
Well, have grace with yourself. And I invite your audience too, have grace with yourself. You're in a global society, for the most part, modern at least, that is literally built around making you comfortable. I know it sounds kind of counterintuitive.
Totally, yeah.
Every product, be comfortable. You're supposed, if you're not comfortable, aka happy, you're doing something wrong.
Yeah.
No, is my short answer to that. growth is uncomfortable. They're not called growing pleasures. They're called growing pains.
Yeah.
And there's so much benefit in that. Honestly, I think if you're going to develop anything in yourself, any personal development skill, you're expanding your capacity to hold discomfort, I think is probably the most beneficial thing you could build in yourself. It'll impact every area of your life.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that you reference kind of growing pains, and that's the direction we need to move towards. And your company is promoting the idea of pleasure. So maybe reconcile that contradiction for people, because I think that probably does exist in a lot of people's minds. We've got to be in the discomfort in order to eventually reach that place where we can be free or experience deeper pleasure.
I think a metaphor I like is the gym. The weights are always heavy.
Yeah.
They're always heavy. The numbers get higher. You're lifting bigger weights, but they are always heavy. The joy of taking care of yourself that way, of looking in the mirror, liking what you see, liking how you feel, whatever that is for you, there's pain involved in that pleasure.
Yeah.
There's effort, I should say, maybe. And to be cheeky, some people just think pain is pleasure. There's a whole BDSM, kink area we could go into, but there's, again, nothing wrong here if you're uncomfortable. And it's important to differentiate being uncomfortable from being unsafe, because I think that's also something we've kind of merged in our society where we think that's the same thing.
Totally.
And they're very, very important distinction.
Right. Maybe sort of go there and define those two areas, because I think that's important.
Well, I'll use again just talking about our relationship, right? So if we're in agreement of relationship, if I have a partner, ideally we're creating that relationship as a safe space in which we can be uncomfortable. That means I'm trusting you to not, use what I'm sharing with you vulnerably against me somehow in the future. I'm trusting, confidentiality, whatever agreements we've set forward about what this relationship container is, I'm trusting you to honor those. That makes me feel safe so that I can be uncomfortable in, I don't know, I'm scared. I'm about to do this new job. I think you're not attracted to me anymore. I'm not attracted to you anymore. Can we talk about that? That we're safe to go into that, and we're not going to abandon each other in that moment or ourselves in that moment. Those are all the agreements that make a container of relationship safe.
And I think that's powerful, and a conversation that, at what point in a relationship would you recommend that people begin to have those conversations?
Date one.
In the very beginning.
Yeah. I mean, can you
establish
imagine?
The agreements?
Well, just, we're I'm here because this. Why are you here? Yeah. What does this date mean?
What does a date mean to you?
Yeah, no, but genuinely, that's what I see so much of the root of issue that I see with couples that come to me is this, years of assumptions from day one. Well, you've asked me out. I'm going to assume that means the same thing to you as it does to me. We're sitting here at this type of date. I'm going to assume that this type of date means the same thing to you as it does to me. Okay, well, now we're exclusive. I'm going to assume that means the same, et cetera. So we're moving in together. We're married now. No one ever talks about what is cheating. Define sex. Defining these terms are so key. But instead we assume that they're the same thing, and then we don't even have a shared language.
It's interesting, because I feel like this is something that the gay community have always done a lot better than the straight community. You can't really be, I don't think, in a same-sex relationship without having those conversations.
Yeah. Well, and that's to the point of, again, whatever relationship dynamic you choose, first of all, please make it a choice.
Yeah.
But even if it's monogamous, there's so much you can learn from non-monogamous dynamics that benefit. Again, it's relationship dynamics, right? Relationship skills benefit all relationship dynamics.
Yeah.
But when we have this prescriptive relationship model, we can be a little lazy.
Yeah, well, I think, this is something that I personally have thought about and sort of asked myself, well, why is that? I often will watch two straight people flirting at a bar, and I can see that, both of them are following a script, and you see that a lot more. Well, from my perspective, this is just my opinion to all listeners. From my perspective, I see that a lot more in that dynamic than I do, I don't know, if you go to a gay bar and you see two gay people flirting, they seem to be out of, that there's no role as much. And why is that? Is it because for the most part there's been kind of a frame that's been sold by movies and media? This is what, this is how a man shows up in a relationship. This is how a woman shows up in a relationship. This is how two people get together. this is how you're gonna have sex. This is
what sex is.
This is the rule book. And I don't know, maybe for gay people that wasn't kind of modeled on that global kind of stage in the same way. So you had to figure it out as you went, and it opened up more dialogue. Or what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, you hit so many of them, like nail on the head. There's, what's the way to say this? There's pros and cons to representation,
right?
In a sense,
yeah.
When it's representation in one way,
with its challenges, right? To just speak from my own experience as a young person, that there was a lot that was confusing about that. I didn't know when a partner had crossed a boundary on a societal level, because how would I have known? You know?
My body is supposed to show up in this way.
Yeah.
So if I'm not, I'm the problem.
Yeah.
Well, hang on. What is my body telling me? Like we're not taught.
Yeah, we're not listening to ourselves.
Hang on, listen. You know, like it's just go into that thing. Like I remember this scene in I think it was the first season of the morning show when is it Reese Witherspoon's character has just this like very abrupt, hot, sexy moment in an alleyway, and the sex finishes when she's done. I literally was I hadn't even known that I had never seen that. I know that sounds like bananas,
right?
But like, oh, right.
Sex can keep going till that moment.
Yeah, and it can be done when she's done. It can be like I have seen in straight sex expressions
that's crazy.
that it's finished when he comes.
Yeah.
Well, she was done.
Yeah. Yeah, as well.
And it literally, like, I got up off the couch and I had to walk into the other room, and I'm like, what did I just? This is amazing.
What have I been settling for?
Yeah, well, it's not even, because that was like fairly recently-ish. I'm so bad at time and like when shows came out, but I was just struck by how I hadn't even realized, with all as immersed as I am in this space and that conversation, that I had never really seen that.
Right.
It struck me more that I had never seen.
How old were you at that point?
When did that show come out? I don't know, 5 years? When did that show come out?
Oh, so it was like recent.
This is recent, yeah. This is not on the show. And that's why I was so shocked, right? Because I'm like, I'm in this conversation, in this space.
Yeah.
And I'm so struck that I've never actually seen that in a mainstream manner. And it would just hit me.
Wow.
So yeah, kind of forget how we got on that conversation, but representation.
Yeah.
Of like, we don't know what we don't know. And that's why diverse representation is important. And I mean that in the full way. Diverse means everybody, right? Everybody's at the table, and all the different manners in which we experience each other.
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting conversation. Like, what have you noticed in terms of how people relate, in the mainstream to are they even aware for the most part of what they're...
Oh, well, shame is such a shroud. Like it's such a... Shame is such a shame. Yeah, there's a lot of fear because it's this taboo quality to it. And don't get me wrong, some people do genuinely enjoy the taboo-ness of it. That's kind of part of the kink and part of the play of it, which is great. And I would love to see a social acceptance of like ice cream flavors. We all have different
preferences.
Yeah, it's just preferences. Yeah. Isn't it interesting? Like, I mean, gosh, sometimes I'll discover a new thing that I'm like, oh, I was not expecting that to work. Okay. Delightful. And sometimes it'll make me laugh, and that's okay. I'm not laughing at it. It's just delightful.
Yeah. How unique. Discovering something new.
Yeah. And we're always capable of that is the thing. I think we have this funny way of like, and maybe it's the sort of, I don't know if you know the term like relationship escalator, how there's like these stages that we're told socially of like, you get here and then you do that part and then you get engaged and you buy the house and you have the kids and and then you die. It's sort of like you buy the house and you have the kids and then you die. There's like this huge swath of time where you should just be working.
Just wait the 30 years out.
Yeah. And it's like, that is such a period of discovery that's being missed. My God.
Yeah, so people end up only having like their early 20s maybe.
Yeah. Oh God, because it's like settle down, right? Yeah. Like you're done now.
Yeah.
Why?
Aren't women in their sexual prime in their 30s as they enter?
Yeah. Generally, it's like at least the last I've read,
into the best
about a 10-year gap between, which is like great if you're a woman dating women. You're right on target.
Exactly. Perfect. Okay, so maybe a contentious or taboo area. What about kinks and fetishes that are born out of, say, trauma or abuse?
Well, I think thank you for that invitation, because I think that's a really important thing to talk about when looking at the kink and BDSM space. What I love so much about that space is the incredible depth of healing that not only I've personally experienced, but that I've been able to witness in others. When you understand, when you understand what that thing is, like we deal with power dynamics, for example, all the time. There's a in life all the time. Like relationship is always a power dynamic.
How's that power dynamic?
I'm feeling good.
Yeah, good.
But it's always there, right? No matter what, no matter who you're talking to, what spaces you're in, there's always a power negotiation, power dynamic. It's not intrinsically or inherently, negative or anything. It just is.
Yeah,
because we all have
power doesn't mean the abuse of power necessarily.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Very, very key.
I think we're very fucked up about that as a society.
Well, we see abuse so often as like the common way, and it's just like, no, that's actually not great.
Yeah. It becomes an assumption if someone holds power, they're going to abuse it in some way.
Well, and that's sort of what I'm getting to in this space is when you understand the power dynamic, and again, you're in agreement with whoever you're sharing that experience with, that's when you actually get to play with it. And and you create parameters around it where you can really explore shifting that dynamic and what that does for you. And, as someone who, has experienced sexual assault, for me, it was very, very transformative to be able to claim that. And someone who is very driven and a rather dominant energy in pretty much every area of my life, to be able to surrender in a way that is safe and completely like overtaken continues to be such an incredible unfolding of my own personal self-love and self-empowerment.
Like a space that you can soften and surrender.
Yeah. It's very, when I'm in that agreement with someone who is a safe partner in that dynamic, that's actually the only way I really know how to really soften into those edges. And it's so beautiful and so healing.
Yeah. And I have so many directions I want to take this conversation. The one that's sort of coming up as we talk about how, power dynamics kind of rule our world, and how certain experiences, whether it's within the BDSM community or just consensual relationships that are conscious, are able to create these deeper healings and help us soften into ourselves. It brings to mind kind of how radical some of the conversation in the world has become around, gender and the LGBT community and what that means. And, I think that there's a huge amount of pain that on the outset, it kind of looks like in some ways we're kind of digressing in terms of like acceptance and tolerance. And I think it's become this really, really contentious conversation that's political, which to me is crazy. Like it should be the least political conversation.
There are so many political conversations that have no business being political conversations.
Right. And, what's your lens on that? And do you see that there's maybe other ways to bring healing to people that are dealing with those struggles?
What I see as a theme with that, and forgive me if I'm not directly answering the question, feel free to leave
it's a hard conversation. Yeah.
It's like there's a lot of angles and layers on that.
Yeah.
It's kind of goes back to, if we have better relationships that last longer, we'll have a better world that lasts longer. There's an avoidance of self that I see in a lot of that. If I know who I am and what I stand for, what I'm about, and how I want to be in the world, and who I'm interested in being with, the fuck does it matter?
Right.
Who you are and how you are. It
doesn't affect me in any way.
Yeah, and it's always been the strangest thing to me. And that's why, to me, it's this epidemic, really, in our society of lack of self.
Well, yeah, like the uptick around like identity politics is crazy.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's also, too, that conversation where we've lost what conversation is.
Yeah.
Where it's sort of like, conversation is about me convincing you of why I'm right.
Yeah.
No, conversation is I'm sharing me with you. You're sharing you with me. We might not agree, but how interesting.
Yeah.
I'd love to learn more.
Yeah.
Kind of how I see it as well, because identity, in a sense, is conversation, right? How I present is how I'm introducing myself to you.
Right. And, I've always kind of seen identity through this lens of, in order for us to really evolve on a personal level and a collective level, in a way, we almost have to transcend the obsession with identity and start to recognize that there's something deeper than identity that resides in all of us. And I know in relationships, whether it's friendship or work relationships, partnership, that's one of the things I look for the most. Like, do I connect with this person on a level that I would call spiritual, that kind of transcends the material, that transcends the identity? That's where I can find personally really deep intimacy, where kind of a lot of that conversation becomes somewhat irrelevant.
Yeah.
But I feel like an alien when I think about how I relate in the context of the conversations that are happening
globally.
globally.
I resonate with that very, very much.
Yeah.
As I like to have a cheeky answer. People, like, where are you from? I'm like, Earth. Where are you from? Like, oh my God, tell me more. Like, we are all aliens in a sense to each other's experience. I will never know the world through you ever. Sure. But how fascinating to be able to engage with you about it. What a gift.
Yeah,
right.
We didn't have to tear each other's heads off.
Yeah, like it's the echo chambers that we've created are concerning,
and just how that's then infiltrating, a young generation. I know, it's like for me, figuring out who I was in back then, 20 years ago, was confusing enough.
Yeah,
I can't imagine the difficulty kind of a young teenager's having right now in our world. Figuring out who they are.
I've reflected, like, I honestly don't think I would have, to just be transparent, survived like middle school, just with the level of and the type of like cyberbullying and that sort of, it's unfathomable to me. So in a sense, this next generation is also, the ones who make it are stronger than anything I think we even could comprehend yet.
Yeah,
to be able to withstand that at the developmental level that they're at is beyond anything I can consider.
It's a lot of consideration for a young mind.
Yes. And they're getting so much information all the time.
Yeah, and I know, there are parents that listen to this, and so do you have any perspective around these topics that you could offer them, in how they're managing those conversations with their young teenagers, adolescents?
I think it goes back to identity a bit, right? So again, sense of self.
Helping them build their self-esteem.
Well, I think it's I want to start with what the parents can take responsibility for in their experience, because I think there's a tendency for a lot of parents, at least what's been reflected to me and in working with parents, of this extension of self. Oh, you came from me, whether you're adopted or, birth, like that my child is an extension of me. No. They are their own autonomous human being. They may be a reflection of you in that we all are. You're a reflection of me. That's all I can ever see. And understanding that, I think, is very important. And coming to your child with a listening ear to understand. Again, that kind of going back to that communication. It's not to tell them, it's to hear them. It's to really understand and advise, because I don't think, we don't know what we don't know. And especially when it comes to developmental levels and age, there are certain, realities to our biology.
Yeah.
Recognize that they may know certain things about things that you don't yet as well, that you can learn from them just as much as they can learn from you, and that they are not an extension of you, I think, is a very, very important distinction for parents to have. Is that answering your question?
It does, yeah. What about, figuring out who you are authentically, in this world?
Just me, or
that's probably advice for everyone, not just teenagers, but I think a lot about the next generation in that, really, who am I? Who really am I underneath all the messages that are being, thrown at me every day? Figuring out who I am, what I'm really into, what I like, what I want for my life. I don't think that has ever been harder for a young person.
Curiosity and discomfort.
So resilience to be in an uncomfortable space.
Yeah. And understand that, again, the goal isn't comfort.
Yeah.
It's okay to be upset by something someone says. And confused. And I think that's the other thing. I have actually a daily practice. Hopefully we can find it on the podcast. I try and find opportunities at least once a day where the only answer is I don't know. Because we're so terrified of that in our society for some reason that we'll just say something to fill in the gaps, and that has damaging repercussions sometimes.
Yeah.
It's okay not to know, even as a professional. I will admit I'm uncomfortable saying that. Like, I get nervous to say I don't know. I'm going to go try and figure it out. If it's, a client bringing me something and I'm you know what, I don't have the answer for that right now, but I'm going to try and figure that out for you.
Yeah. So what about parents that have, teenagers today that are maybe struggling because of all the messages that are being thrown at them? They're really struggling to figure out who they are authentically. How can a parent, support that journey also without being pressured by what society is telling them to do as a parent? Because I think there's a lot of that as well.
This is the right way to parent.
Yeah.
All of that. I think it's twofold, because it's remembering that as much as it may seem like your child is an extension of you, they're not. they're a reflection of you in that.
It's a good
everyone
reminder.
is. Yeah, I think it's very, very important, because it's easy to, I mean, that's kind of what society says, but they are their own individual. They may not know what that even means yet.
Listen up.
Yeah. And you might not even know, you know, and that's okay. Coming into those conversations with a sense of curiosity and really trying to understand your child and where they're coming from is very important.
Non-defensiveness.
Yeah, because them, like any relationship, whether it's your child, a friend, a coworker, whatever, again, their experience is not an attack on yours.
Right.
They are,
I mean, such a powerful kind of just rule of thumb generally, not just in parenting, but just broadly, someone else's position and truth is not a personal attack on your perspective.
and what a gift a child can be as a constant reminder of that, right? Of like, like you being that.
It's not about me.
Yeah. Oh my God. It's not about me.
Yeah.
I had a child, and it's not actually just to have another me. Very, very important distinction, and really trying, again, like there is, you know, we don't know what we don't know, and there are certain realities to take into consideration when it comes to development, and from just like a biological, physiological place, certain, you know, ages. There is wisdom to be imparted by someone who's older, potentially, but your child can also impart wisdom onto you.
Yeah, I mean, they're closer to the source, right?
Exactly.
As well.
They're fresh eyes, you know, that beginner's mindset, if you will, right?
Yeah.
You can be so immersed in how the last 40 years have gone. Like, this is how it goes.
What happened to you as well.
Well, you know what? It's actually 40 years later. So
it's a different
they're
era.
way more versed in the current language of what it is to be than you are.
I think this point around it's not about you, just to give a context on why that strikes a chord, my background as an entrepreneur has been in mental health, solving challenges within the mental health space, and often looking at how community dynamics and increasing emotional intelligence improve collective, you know, well-being and have better mental health outcomes, which was, you know, seen as a radical idea when I started my journey, which is crazy, right? One of the things that I would see so often, though, is within the mental health conversation, and when you go back 10 years, you know, think of the time when no one could have that conversation. Talking about a mental health challenge was one of the biggest taboos.
My parents' generation, like there was just nothing.
Just couldn't do it, right? And it was like a disease. If you had anxiety or depression, you were just cursed for the rest of your life. And what I started to notice in helping facilitate those challenging conversations between whether it was families or broad communities or workplaces, school communities, often the inner monologue of people would be when they saw someone who was going through a difficult time, the inner monologue would be, what if I do something wrong? What if I say the wrong thing? What if I mess up that conversation? What if I make it worse? And I would see so often that people's inner monologue was just so self-oriented, unintentionally. Like, it didn't come from a selfish place, but they weren't able to actually sort of put that aside and park that and start to consider, okay, well, actually, why don't I just listen and extend myself to try to understand this person's experience? And it's not actually about me and what I say. It's actually about them and being there for them. And just supporting people to recognize that often was a really pinnacle moment in kind of their community's transformation, because they were all walking around. And I think people generally do this. I'm sure parents do this. They're thinking about themselves all the time, and they don't know how to extend themselves to that other person.
Well, and it's natural. There's this bad rap around the word selfish. We have to be. We are self-sustaining.
Yeah, and I say it with no stigma, and I know that it doesn't come from a bad place in people. I think it's an untrained, it's an untrained place.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's just practice, right? Humaning is practice. Constant
relationships are practice.
How do you want to do this thing? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Relating is not something we're actually ever really taught. Where there's, again, speaking of assumptions, there's this social assumption that like, oh, well, you probably had parents, so they like probably modeled great communication for you. Yeah, that's common. No, generally these are skills that we actually need to learn and invest in, just like you would anything. We invest in, professional communication
and
skills.
How much dysfunction is it going to take before you start asking the question?
So wouldn't you rather prevent rather than have to like deal when it's already, the house is on fire?
Right.
Well, and something you're touching on too with that communal concept, it's something that is very much prevalent in multi-partner dynamics, right? Especially in the conversation around kids. So if you have again, no matter how many partnerships or partners you have, healthy, unhealthy, what have you, abusive, non-abusive, and the more healthy, constructive relationships a child has in their life, it's proven to benefit how they mature and how they grow and how they communicate. Right. So this idea that multi-partner dynamics are inherently unhealthy is so damaging, because you're actually preventing really beautiful potential. There's a lot of not great, solo partner coupledom that is happening. And how is that better intrinsically just because it's two people? It's about the quality of relationship, right? It's about how we're relating more than it is how many partners.
So this is a perfect entry into the next topic that I wanted to explore, this idea of traditional, you can challenge that, but for lack of a better frame, let's call it a traditional kind of nuclear family, and the argument that children that come from, parents that remain together and remain strong in their family dynamic statistically are meant to be healthier and go on to, have better careers, so on and so forth, have less trauma. Let's talk about that.
Great.
Because we are definitely starting to see, I think, a shift away from those ideals as a world, as a generation. We also have a world where the birth rate is declining rapidly. And I actually think that that's a big problem that not enough people are talking about, other than maybe really controversial figures like Elon Musk. How does that all fit into the way you think about relationships?
Thank you. Well, I want to start by saying I agree. Children who come from stable family dynamics, stable relationships, tend to do better for longevity's sake, do better in their careers, again, communicate better, have better relationships in their life.
Secure.
And that has nothing to do with the number of partners involved in that. It has to do with the quality of relationship. So we're looking at this idea that because we're told, again, this one type of relationship, monogamy, is the way. It's only about 10,000 years old. Traditional relationships are actually non-monogamous.
And was that introduced by the church?
Yes and no.
Okay.
So in the way that we understand it now, yes. Initially, it really came about with agricultural development, and it really had more to do with land ownership and passing on lineage, things like that. And then the church, I want to say specifically the church, not religion.
So
the church as a structure
was a resourcefulness. Was a matter of resourcefulness, and not.
And again, it had nothing really to do with love.
How did Hollywood boycott that to such a degree? How did it become? But then you also have before Hollywood, Shakespeare, that and many ancient poets that talk about true love and.
Love is not intrinsically related, though, right? So marriage was a contract.
Yeah.
Again, it had to do with ownership. It was very, very normal to have mistresses. And if you had the person you had, your children with, or, had your household with, and then you had your lovers, and that was very normal.
Oh, to be a king.
Yeah. And yes, of course, depending on your affluence, that made things a lot more accessible. Generally, somebody who didn't have much in the way of, financial ability didn't have as many partners probably. And that's a whole other conversation.
I think that stood the test of time. Potentially.
There's wiggle room.
It sounds like a lot of work to have multiple girlfriends.
As financial, affluence is becoming less and less intrinsically connected to gender expression.
Right.
There's some more freedom, and that is absolutely a whole other beautiful conversation to have.
All that financial liberation of women has been a big part of that revolution, actually.
Actually, statistically speaking, in a heteronormative partnership, the woman is actually the one who generally broaches the subject of non-monogamy these days, because there is
dissatisfied. Yeah,
it can be
they're starting to see more morning show scenes where
wait, I can have pleasure. And ideally, it's
my
additive.
Orgasm can be the end of this.
Like, hold on, I can have an orgasm. Wait, that's like a whole other conversation. But just to go back to what you were saying, the church really, as an organization, took marriage as a structure, as a concept, and attached morality to it, and that made it a tool for control.
Yeah,
and that's kind of how we experience it now. And now we've attached love and everything else to it as well, which just complicates it so much more.
Right.
Well, try reading an actual marriage contract. Actually read one.
And actually, what is your view on the kind of frame of marriage in a legal sense and versus the idea of kind of commitment and all of the, I guess, relational elements, love-based elements of marriage and how we view marriage, do you think that we should be working towards a society where we actually opt out of the legal construct of marriage? Do you think that that's
I think it's a decision you get to make. I don't.
Your real personal perspective.
I'm interested in it. Me personally, I'm curious.
Right.
I'd like to investigate that.
Okay. So if someone that you really loved asked you to marry them in the traditional sense, it would be something that you would consider.
Well, in the traditional sense, meaning we sign a legal binding contract, as long as there's a prenup involved. Absolutely.
So you would say, okay, so
100%.
Prenup would be the...
Yes, I have what I've built, you have what you've built, and now we're going to build something
Such a
together.
romantic conversation.
Romance has nothing to do with marriage. I always like to say, like, the Disney movies end at the beginning of the relationship.
Okay,
I'm far more interested in, like, seeing Ariel and Prince Eric do their taxes. Like, what does that look like? Although I guess he's royalty, he doesn't have to deal with it. But
yeah, a lot of that's taken care of in these hypothetical scenarios.
Yeah.
Right.
The juicy stuff is really the happily ever after. Like, what is that? That's the work.
If you're signing a prenup, what is the point of making that kind of legally binding?
Well, that's what I'm saying. So to me, a prenup is, I've created what I've created thus far. You've created what you've created thus far. And now we're creating something together. Okay. How interesting is that?
Right.
Well,
okay. And then,
it's a business relationship in a lot of ways.
It sounds like.
And it's like, it comes with some fun, benefits, but it's not necessitated, right? So like
wifey and hubby status.
Well, there's, and couple privilege is a whole other conversation we get to look at too.
Okay.
There's a lot of privileges in presenting that way.
And just on a societal level.
Societal and legally. There's no protections whatsoever for multi-partner dynamics. We're starting to see shifts at a local, like regional, citywide level.
Like an absolute bureaucratic nightmare.
It is. It always will be. But we have ordinances now, like, for example, so you can get kicked out of your home, you can lose your job, you can have your children taken away because there's no protection for multi-partner dynamics as a protected class.
Wow.
So we're fighting for relationship
I've never
orientation.
even considered that. So you obviously legally can't be married to more than one person at once.
Legally, and that's a separate conversation, yes. But that's how the unfortunate reality of when emotions are involved in painful relationship shifts like divorce. If you say you are a married couple and you have been dating someone together, or you've agreed that you each have your own, partners or whatever it is, someone's upset at how the divorce is going. Well, my partner cheated on me. See, look at all these texts and all this information, and I should have custody of the children and I should get the house and all that because they've acted out of integrity.
Well,
there's no protection.
They're playing the third partner off in the situation.
Or what I mean is that they're using a potentially an agreed dynamic against, and it's totally legal. Yeah. Even though everyone's agreed to it and it's been fine. That's an example.
Yeah.
But there's no protection. So we're starting to
the court would always favor the person
100% because it's seen as infidelity.
Yeah.
Even though it was consensual.
Yeah. So. Yeah. I mean, that's a whole other kettle of fish. Have you seen families that are navigating this well?
Yeah. So I do work with couples who are, looking at potentially divorce, and maybe that's they maybe they still care about each other, whatever it is, but there's a mismatch in relationship orientation, libido, whatever is going on. I work with them to help them understand that there's actually more than two options, or really, I guess, three. It's, stay together for the kids and be miserable.
Open it up.
Potentially. Why not?
Yeah.
Divorce, it's marriage again. It's assets that it has nothing to do with all that ushy gushy stuff that we want to write songs about.
I can't imagine it would be a layer of complexity that would be very challenging with young children, though, right? To be navigating multiple relationships.
That's a decision that we work on together because when to help them understand. So whether you divorce and, you're dating now, or you're not divorced and you're dating now, it's a similar conversation. Most people don't want to hurt people that they care about.
Yeah.
Relationships that last that long, there is no better or worse if there are other partners involved at some point or not. It's about an agreement. It's totally normal to kind of go in and out of attraction with somebody. You can potentially have a relationship where you're lit on fire the whole time. That's amazing. But it doesn't mean if you're not, there's something wrong.
Do you really believe that that's possible?
I mean, anything's possible.
But you would consider it a real anomaly.
It would be a rarity,
yeah.
I would say. Because we're growing, we're changing. Like, there's so much that shifts.
It's a lot that has to consistently align.
Yeah, because like it is so this is so normal, right?
Yeah.
Relationship, and again, I don't want it to come across like multi-partner dynamics are about avoiding something in another relationship. It's the commitment to be in relationship. I'm very interested in life partnership, whether that's with one person or two people or what have you. I'm very interested in that longevity.
Do you have like a max? Do you have like a
Yes?
So what would like,
Because the only
at that point it's just too many people in a relationship.
and I'll tell you why.
Okay.
The only finite resource we have is time.
You just don't have enough time.
Yes.
And what's the max?
3 core partners.
Okay. So
that means somebody who's like potential life partnership for me, that I'm really committing time, energy, effort, we're building into our lives. And then I have other partners that, FWB is a term, but friends with benefits. The F is real. We're friends. We invest in each other. We're interested. We have a caring. It's real. But to have those real, like, more life partnership type dynamics where we're again building a life together, maybe a household, etc. 3 is really the max. Otherwise you start to really lose quality in that time.
have you seen anyone do that well with like 4 or 5 people?
I would say generally, I mean, there's, you get into the polycule conversation where there can be a group of
What is it?
20. So polycule is a term that's used to describe multiple people that are connected. Yeah. Well, you do a lot of work with communal living, communal structure. That is a communal structure. So it's a connection of people that are all romantically connected one way or the other. It doesn't mean every single person isn't necessarily playing with each other, but I'll introduce some terminology, right? So if you and I are dating the same person, but we're not dating each other, that person is called a hinge partner and we're metamors. So we're connected through that person.
What generally is that relationship like? Is it like I see you at the coffee shop and I say, hey?
Ideally, at least friendly.
Do we talk about our mutual partner? Or
you can, those are the agreements. Those are the agreements, right? What are the boundaries? How do we relate? That's something you talk to your partner about. And
I've never been good with a lot of rules. I think this would be...
Boundaries aren't rules. Very, very different. Rules are imposed. Boundaries are agreement.
Yeah. So what's your vision? Let's kind of end it here. When you think about the world, I don't know, 30, 50, 100 years from now, how do you think we're going to be relating?
Well, hopefully hopefully we're starting now. So by then, we're seeing relating as a skill set. We understand it as that, this is something I can develop in myself. This is something I can optimize. This is something that will serve every area of my life because I'm always in relationship. And so it's really given the, not the weight, but the importance that it should have in our society, because that's, to me, the breakdown of everything is that we have no relating skills. We're not prioritizing that. So ideally, we're prioritizing it at that point. And that results in people actually understanding all the different relationship dynamics that are available, from platonic to non-platonic, and understanding that these are all ingredients that we get to choose, and choosing those, actually having relationship as a choice, really getting to decide, this is the relationship structure that's best for me. This is my ideal relationship structure. I am now going to be able to communicate that to people and have partners that want to build that with me.
Right. And I like that vision for the future. I think that's definitely an upgrade from what we're seeing right now. So
I think better sex for everyone.
Yeah, well, that was going to be my other kind of circle back around. So you began by saying that we need leaders that are having better sex, basically, and
better
that would that would solve a lot of problems.
It's a very powerful energy in us. We're animals in that degree.
I think it's really linked to our life force and our creativity. That's undeniable. I know when my creative energy is really active, it's always when my mojo is strongest.
There's I can't remember the study of it. Drive is drive, basically. It's been determined that human drive is drive, sex drive, ambition, all of it. It's intrinsically connected. Yeah. So the more driven you are, the more driven you are. That's why I love when my partners. I honestly I love when my partners want other people. That's very attractive to me. Yeah. It's not like there's 100 love points or 100 attraction points. They have to like take 5 for me to be like, that's not how that works. If they're on, they're on. They're driven. They're going for something. I'm very attracted to very driven, ambitious people. Yeah. That comes with it.
That's probably a different podcast, but a very interesting point. I think a lot of people that are attracted to people that have a lot of drive tend to also be the people that then, try to control or
that's an unaddressed insecurity. Right. And as we do a whole podcast on the 4 different kinds of jealousy and like how to address all that.
That'd be a great podcast. We should definitely do
all right, great. Stay tuned. Part 2.
Totally. Put in the comments.
What should we talk about?
What should we talk about? Great. I would love that. I'd find that really interesting. But the global leaders of our world, I don't know, what would your advice to them kind of in this context where they probably do feel a sense of, I have to watch my back, I have to preserve, what I've built. I think definitely society is built in a way culturally and literally that you get to a certain level of success and you go into preservation mode. You actually spend more energy probably protecting what you've built than, generosity and further expansion.
I would say spending a lot more time trying to protect what you've built because again, we're not generally learning these skills of relationship development. So trust doesn't come from control. Controlling someone else isn't how you learn to trust them. The only way to build trust is to willingly make the choice to say, hey, I'm giving you the opportunity. You have the ability to hurt me.
Yeah.
And then allowing you to prove that you won't over and over again throughout time. That's the only way to build trust. But when we don't have that, when we're not addressing insecurities like, hey, I don't actually trust myself in choosing people well. Oof, that's a deep one for a lot of people. Yeah. It's a lot easier to not even look at that and just go, no, you have to do this and this and this, and that's the only way.
Yeah.
That there's no relationship being built there.
That's super powerful. And so someone maybe listening to this that is in a powerful position, and as a result of that power, they've started to isolate themselves, or they've found themselves in a really isolated place. I found myself there before.
You can be discerning. Discerning is different. There's choice in that.
So this was kind of my question, convince them what the benefit and reward would be in starting to loosen. Because I really agree with you. I think that if we had leaders that were committed to this journey, naturally they would become more empathetic, more connected. Some of the really key challenges that I'm passionate about globally, EQ and empathy, I think, this is probably the most powerful way to start to develop more empathy in your life. But they could be sitting on their success, just, they've been so isolated for so long, they've been fucked over so many times. And they genuinely see the challenges, in human nature. Convince them to be more vulnerable in 30 seconds. What's your elevator pitch?
How have you developed your skills for discernment? Because if you haven't developed those skills, of course you don't have confidence in them. If you don't know what to look for, because there are patterns. We like to all think we're like unique snowflakes and there's no one like humans are very patterned. So if you develop your discernment skills, meaning you know what patterns to look for and the qualities of people that, should be able to earn your trust, then of course you're insecure about that. Develop that skill set so that you can learn to trust your power of discernment, and then you'll be able to open up to the people who deserve for you to open up to them.
Yeah, I love that. Well, we could speak for another 3 hours, but for the sake of time, I've loved this conversation. Any final thank you messages to our listeners as they go away and hopefully have some form of existential crisis when it comes to the framing of their relationship?
May it be a gentle crisis. But I recommend it. I've had at least one significant one. And it's not fun, but it's worth it.
From serial monogamy to cathartic BDSM in a matter of years. So that sounds like a radical journey.
The takeaway for me would be, I like to say, whether you want to open up your relationship to include other people, or you just want to open up more authentically to each other, or quite frankly yourself, I just want you to be able to open up without blowing up. And so it's really learning that skill of being uncomfortable and all the things that come with that.
Yeah.
It's okay to be uncomfortable. In fact, if you're a little uncomfortable, most of the time, you're really taking care of your future self.
I think that's brilliant advice. Ally, thank you so much. Where can these guys follow you? The link's also going to be in the show notes.
Fabulous. Passport2pleasure.com on all the socials. Substack, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok.
Substack's on it. Well,
oh yeah, I'm on it now. I'm a writer too, so I'm like, ooh, I get to nerd out in the written word. Let's go.
Cool. Love it. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Likewise. Thank you.